Chapter 11. Another Visitor.
During the long snowy winter, Clara wrote many letters to Heidi, promising to visit in the spring. At first, it seemed to Heidi as if the spring would never come. But after the Alm uncle rented a little house in Dorfli so that Heidi could attend the village school, the time passed quickly. Heidi was a good student and was soon at the head of the class, but her friend Peter paid no attention to his lessons.
"You are going to learn to read,"
she told him. So, with her help, and despite his grumbling, Peter was soon reciting his ABCs. By the end of the winter, he could even read some of the simpler hymns to his grandmother. May had come again. From every height, the overflowing brooks rushed down into the valley. The spring wind blew through the fir trees and shook off the old dark needles, so the young green ones could dress the trees in beauty. Heidi ran here and there and could not tell which spot was the loveliest. It seemed as if all creatures were singing with delight. On the Alm, on the Alm. Heidi, her grandfather, and the goats moved back to the hut on the Alm. From the workshop behind the house came the sound of busy hammering and sawing. In front of the workshop door, there stood a fine new stool, and her grandfather was working on another.
"Oh, I know what that is for,"
exclaimed Heidi.
"That will be needed when Clara comes from Frankfurt. There will have to be one for her grandmama and another for Fräulein Rottenmeier."
"I don't know if the Fräulein will be coming or not,"
said the grandfather.
"but it will be safer to have one ready, so that we can invite her to sit down if she comes."
Heidi looked at the little wooden stool.
"I don't believe she would sit on it,"
she said doubtfully.
"Then we will invite her to the sofa with the beautiful green grass covering,"
he replied, gesturing toward the yard. Suddenly, there came the whistling sound of a rod swinging through the air. Heidi ran out of the woodshed and was surrounded in a twinkling by the leaping goats. Peter pushed them all away, for he had a letter to give Heidi.
"It's from Clara. Everything is packed.
She read out loud.
I can hardly wait to see you."
Peter turned away scowling as he drove the frightened goats up the mountain. He didn't want to share Heidi with anybody, particularly not the people who had taken her away to Frankfurt. On the day Clara was expected, Heidi sat out on the grandfather's bench, watching for the visitors. Soon, she saw an odd procession winding its way up the mountain. First came two men carrying Clara in a sedan chair. Then a man with Clara's wheelchair upended on his head. Then two with great baskets strapped to their backs. Bringing up the rear was a man leading a white pony, ridden by Frau Sesemann.
"There they are! There they are!"
screamed Heidi, jumping up in the air with delight.
"My dear Alm uncle,"
the old woman called in her friendly way.
"what a fine view you have. Many a king might envy you. And how well Heidi looks, like a June rose."
The men put the chair down on the ground, and Heidi and Clara greeted each other joyfully.
"Oh, how beautiful it is here,"
Clara said. The grandfather lifted her gently from the sedan into her wheelchair, and Heidi pushed her so that she could see the goat shed and the singing fir trees and the flower-strewn meadow. Soon they were sitting at the table that the Alm uncle had placed outside.
Clara?
Frau Sisseman exclaimed halfway through the meal of bread and toasted cheese.
I have never seen you eat so much. Everything tastes so much better here than in Frankfurt. I don't think I've ever been so hungry.
The girl replied. The grandfather turned to the grandmama.
If you would allow it, we would like for Clara to stay here with us for the summer. The mountain air would be good for her.
My dear uncle,
The old lady said, a twinkle in her eye.
you have read my mind.
The two girls shouted with joy like two escaped birds, and the grandmama's face lit up with sunshine. When the hired men came toiling up the mountain again with the sedan chair and the white pony, only Frau Sisseman returned with them. The alm uncle himself took the bridle and led the pony down the steep mountain. Of all the wonders of that marvelous day, the best for Clara was snuggling into the bed the grandfather had made for her in the loft and looking through the round window at the starry sky.
Oh, Heidi,
She breathed.
being up here is like riding through the heavens.
The weeks passed happily for the two girls. Every morning, the grandfather carried Clara down the ladder to her wheelchair. Heidi pushed her along the rocky path so they could collect bluebells and blue gentians. Often they sat and talked or wrote letters to the grandmama. Every morning and every evening, Peter came by with the goats. Clara soon learned their names and longed to play with them. But Peter always brandished his stick furiously and drove the goats past the hut as quickly as he could. One morning, however, the alm uncle called Peter aside.
From today on, let little Swan do as she likes,
He said.
She knows where the sweetest herbs and grasses are, so that she will give splendid milk. If she climbs high up on the mountain peaks, follow her. Understand? Why are you looking as if you would like to swallow someone, Peter? No one is in your way. Now go!
Peter was accustomed to following the alm uncle's orders, and he set off with his goats obediently. A sudden thought, however, made him call out to Heidi, who was leaping along the flock as they bounded up the path.
You must come with me.
He said harshly.
No,
She replied.
I cannot come to the pasture so long as Clara is with us.
With that, she tore herself away from the goats and ran back inside the hut. Peter was so angry, he shook both fists at the empty wheelchair that stood innocently beside the doorway. Then he ran up the mountain with his flocks springing along behind him. Questions. 1. Where did Heidi live during the long, snowy winter? 2. How did Heidi do in school? 3. Did Heidi help Peter learn to read? 4. What could Peter read by the end of the winter? 5. How many new stools was the alm uncle making for the visitors to come? 6. Why did Peter turn away scowling as Heidi read aloud the letter from Clara? 7. Did Clara and Frau Sisseman climb up the mountain on foot? 8. Did the grandmama agree to let Clara stay with Heidi and the alm uncle for the summer? 9. What was the best of all the wonders that Clara experienced on that marvelous day? 10. Why was Peter angry at the empty wheelchair which Clara sat when she was out?